Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, the region's longest-running public affairs program. Legislative Report is a weekly review of activity at the state capitol featuring lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota. Most importantly, it's an opportunity for viewers to call or email their legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, WDSE News and Public Affairs producer Greg Grell. Well, with just 2 weeks left in the legislative session, there is still much work to get done, but a lot of progress has been made toward balancing the state budget and ironing out other major legislation. Right now, you have an opportunity to ask our lawmaker about questions about issues at the state capitol. We have two phone numbers. Locally, dial 788-2844 with your questions, or if you're calling from outside the Duluth calling area, use our toll-free number, which is 1-877-307-8762. You can also send your question in an email to askmlr@wdsc.org. Now let's introduce the lawmakers joining us in the WDSE studio today, and it is Representative Mary Murphy, a Democrat from Hermantown District 3B, correct, Representative Murphy?
That's correct.
And thanks very much for joining us on this beautiful afternoon. The sun finally came out.
Well, it just came out while I was doing some work, and so then I thought, oh, maybe I should go outside and rake. But then I looked at my watch and thought, oh, I don't quite have enough time to do that. So I continued to read and do my work.
That's right. Well, probably the big news at the end of the week this week was the House passing a minimum wage bill. And that bill, as I understand it, will increase the minimum wage to $9.50 an hour in 2 years. But that's only for large businesses. Can you talk about that bill a little bit? And that, of course, the Senate still hasn't passed a bill. So that's the House version right now.
That's the House version, and that's the version that the author, Ryan Winkler from St. Louis Park, really wanted to go with into conference committee. I don't expect that the House version will come back.
At least at that rate?
At that rate, but it stayed pretty close to what he wanted, although there were some amendments that went on. It was just before the pension bill that I was carrying, so I didn't pay real close attention, but it's basically just a continuation of the minimum wage that we haven't raised for many years, and that it would raise up some of the workers so that they might become part of the middle income group rather than the bottom income group. The opponents of the bill made strong cases for the costs to business that might have, but the majority prevailed.
Now, the bill does have a provision that says that this would only apply, the $9.50 top minimum wage would only apply for large businesses. Do you know what would constitute a large business under this bill? What size business would have to pay that wage?
I don't know.
You're not sure what that is?
I don't know, but it's a business with several hundred workers.
Okay. And the Senate yet to pass a bill, so whatever happens in the Senate then will get worked out in a conference committee.
That's correct.
And you mentioned your pension bill that you were carrying. Talk a little bit about that. There was some coverage in the newspaper this morning about that measure.
Right.
Talk about what that's all about.
Well, the bill carried the funding for 5 pension plans that, in particular, that need a little more money put into them. In the late 90s, the economy was so good and business investments had been so good that we froze some pension plans, employee contributions, and we reduced some employer contributions over the years. And since that time, we have increased employee contributions and are doing so again in this bill. And to the 5 affected employee groups. But we're also increasing employer contributions, and in some cases that's the state of Minnesota. But it will also be in some cases the cities and the counties also, because it's the policy in the bill is the policy language for the police and fire pension plans, and for the state patrol, and for the judges, and for St. Paul, Duluth, TRA teachers. St. Paul and Duluth are getting an investment or a state aid that they have not received in the past. And St. Paul is getting $7 million a year, and Duluth will get $6 million a year. The TRA part is just a language that allows them to level off the penalties for early retirements, to make it not so drastic if people do choose to retire early. Although there is a trend in all these funds that early retirements are pretty much a thing of the past. Not a whole lot of people are choosing to take early retirement because that is more than what they are able to pay. And with the rising costs of health insurance, they don't want to take that risk.
Now, reading what the newspaper wrote this morning, a couple of the surcharges, I think they're for auto insurance and homeowners insurance, would help support the police and the fire pensions. Is that accurate? Is that how that would work?
That is not in this bill.
Okay.
The people that voted for the bill, 75 people, members of the legislature, voted yes on the pension bill on Friday, and they did not vote for the insurance or the 2 insurances on auto or police. That is in the House, that is in the tax bill, and I'm not sure if it is even alive in the Senate. So it's not a sure thing that that's the way that's going to be done. But in the House, it did pass I believe in the tax bill. But Joe Atkins is carrying that bill, and it was not in this bill.
So how would those increase to bring the pension funds up? Where does the funding come from that at this point right now? Would it come from increased taxes?
It would come from the general fund, yes.
From the general fund, okay.
General fund appropriation. But that was part of a target that was set aside for pensions that the Ways and Means Committee allocated or appropriated in their budget resolution.
Okay. We do have a call from Vicki in Duluth, and a reminder that we do encourage your calls today for Minnesota Legislative Report for Representative Murphy. Vicki from Duluth says 2 years ago, Governor Dayton canceled a matching grant for parents who invested or saved $2,000 a year with the state for college expenses. That was due to budget cuts and the economic downturn, and she's wondering, will those matching grants be implemented again? And if you know if that's a possibility.
I don't know.
Okay, so
But
nothing new right now.
I know there's new money in the higher ed bill. There is new money for the University of Minnesota and for MnSCU and for student grants, the Pell Grants, the Minnesota grants, for students in the college and university systems, public and private.
Okay. We're getting down to the part of the session now where the House and the Senate have passed, in many cases, their version of bills, and conference committees made up of House and Senate members will work out the details to repass identical bills in either house. Talk a little bit, for people who may not be familiar, how that conference committee system works, how those conferees are selected to go to work on those bills.
The Speaker or the Senate Committee on, or the Senate Majority Leader picks the people that would be on the conference committee in consultation with the author of the bill, generally, always, almost always. It's rare if it doesn't happen. The author of the bill is the chief conferee. And then for finance bills, there are 4 other people selected. And usually it's people that voted for the bill in the respective chamber. And then the conference committees meet. And the first order of business is to compare the House bill with the Senate bill. It's called a side-by-side because we have the House positions and the Senate positions, and they're on a piece of paper, and you can see all paragraph by paragraph how they match up in article after article. And the spreadsheets are the same. There's the governor's recommendations, there's the House recommendations, there's the Senate recommendations, and then there's a space for the conference committee recommendations. And we in the first meetings, we always review the differences and the likes. And then after that, knowing that there has to be 3 votes from both sides to put something into the bill. So we go piece by piece, or article by article, or proposal by proposal, and say, this is what we're proposing to put into the bill, into the final bill. And that process usually starts with all the things that are the same. And so that becomes the skeleton of the bill.
And that gets voted on the first, that's the first of the 3 votes?
That usually happens that way, but it doesn't always.
Sure.
And it's up to the person that's doing the organizing, and that's usually the 2 chairs working together. But usually the motions are made to do the likes. And then after that, the things that are closest, and then the things that are most different. But sometimes you talk about the things that are most different, and then kind of have it sit out until closer to the end. But I think, like in case of the state government finance and Veterans Affairs bill, I think our conference committee probably will be done this week.
A couple other questions on conference committees. Are they typically bipartisan? Will there be both Republican and Democrats on most conference committees?
If the minority voted, if someone from the minority voted
In favor of the
in
bill?
favor of the bill.
You have to
But
have voted for the bill
Well,
to
you
be on the
don't,
conference?
not always, but usually.
Usually? Okay.
Sometimes it's different, but so far I haven't seen anyone that hasn't voted for it on the conference committee. But my conference committee didn't have a Republican vote.
Okay. And that's the state
for the
government?
state government, finance, and Veterans Affairs. Even though we met everything that they brought to our attention that they wanted in, they still didn't feel that they could vote for it. And so the speaker asked how I felt about that, and did I want anyone from the minority, and I did suggest a minority person to be on, but that person declined because she said she had more important things to do. She didn't want to be, she just had 2 or 3 things of interest, and she didn't want to spend all the time with the whole just for her 2 or 3 things. And so she declined the opportunity. And so there are 5 Democratic conferees.
Is that typical size of a conference committee, 5 or?
There are 5 for finance committees, but for
policy bills?
another policy bill or a small bill that doesn't have a lot of committee interest, they will be 3.
Okay.
And you need 3 votes on either side to get something in. And so there has to be 3 House people yes and 3 Senate people yes.
Okay. We've got a call from Sally in Duluth, and she has a question, Representative Murphy. She's wondering, are you in favor of a moratorium on wolf hunting in Minnesota?
The question isn't going to come up, I don't believe. The environment bill, it would have been in the environment bill,
And it isn't there.
and it isn't there.
Is that something that a lot of lawmakers like to leave up to the discretion of the DNR? I know the DNR this year imposed a moose hunting ban because of the latest moose count numbers. What's your feeling about that? Should you leave that to the professionals and not have the legislature make decisions like that?
Usually that's the best thing to do. But the wolf is a little bit different. There's been a lot of discussion, and we had discussion in caucus on it, and it was something that it was very close. And
that is an emotional issue in Minnesota.
it's an emotional issue, and it was determined by the people on the conference committee to, or not the conference committee, but in leadership and on the environment committee, that it shouldn't come up.
All right, we've got a caller from Carlton who's wondering about the definition of full-time employment, and he's wondering, will that be changed to 30 hours a week after the first of the new year? And if so, what are your thoughts about that? Is that something that's come up in the legislature? Typically, full-time is considered 40 hours.
There was discussion on that in the minimum wage bill, and I believe it's still 40 hours, except that the 48 hours for agricultural workers.
Because they are typically put in long hours during
That's correct.
All right, and the callers went on to just ask your thoughts about it as far as employee benefit eligibility, Social Security, things like that. Would your preference be to keep it at 40 hours a week as it is now?
Yes.
Okay, got you on the spot there. Okay.
Yeah.
Another committee that you serve on is the Legacy Committee, and there's still some work to do. That's the committee that spends the money or designates where the money goes from the tax that the voters of Minnesota passed several years ago to support outdoors arts, cultural heritage. What's happening with
Clean
that
water.
committee? And clean water. What's happening?
Parks and trails.
Lots of parts.
Yeah, the Outdoor Heritage Fund, the Clean Water Fund, Parks and Trails Fund, and the Arts and History and Culture Education Fund. That is having a little problem. And so that has not been heard. That's the only finance bill that's still out there.
And that has to be acted on before the end of the session to designate
well,
more
in order
funding?
to get new money into the 4 funds, yes.
Do you see that impasse, something happening to break that impasse?
The people have been working very hard. Phyllis Kahn is the author, and she's been working very hard, one-on-one, to talk to people that have objections to one thing or another mostly it's the Outdoor Heritage and the Parks and Trails funds that are keeping people stirred up. And she's working very hard one-on-one to get that out onto the floor. And I think it will happen.
All right, well, we'll keep
by
watching.
Wednesday.
We'll keep watching and follow that.
We'll see if I'm right.
You can always watch, follow the legislature on the Minnesota channel, here channel 8.4, 31.4 on the Iron Range, and on your local cable station. So it's a good way of keeping up. They do a nice job of covering both House and Senate committees and floor sessions. So I'm sure a lot of your constituents probably mentioned that they see you during that, when you're chairing your committee.
I am just amazed at how many constituents watch that channel and talk about it. Yes.
The folks that are interested have a great way now of keeping up with what's going on.
And then they get upset because it goes off, evidently. It goes off early in the evening.
At 6 o'clock, I believe.
And
yeah, unless they have a special schedule that they can set up.
Then they don't see what happened.
In the evening. But they do a nice job of rehashing the next day events of the evening's committees when time allows. So. Another measure that's been getting attention this week, Representative Murphy, is a measure that's moving along that would allow child care and personal care workers to unionize in Minnesota. What can you tell us about that bill?
I think that it's a voluntary thing. That
it's not a requirement.
That's
Gives them the
not
option.
required that workers would have to join a union. Is that they could voluntarily ask for a union vote. I believe that has passed out of Ways and Means, and it will be on general orders sometime this week.
And some Republicans don't like that idea because they think that state money, because nursing home workers and personal care workers are often funded by state funding, that some of that funding would go to pay for union dues. Do you think that's a legitimate argument against that?
The state funding wouldn't go for union dues unless it's paid directly to salaries. And then once it's paid as a salary to an individual, that individual would have to choose whether or not they wanted to ask to join a union.
So in your mind, it wouldn't be directly going to the union dues?
That's correct.
Okay. Mary from Duluth called, and she had a question. Her question is, why can 16-year-old high school dropouts obtain a driver's license? She'd like to see that be changed to 18 or 21 if you drop out as an incentive to graduate. What's your opinion about it? I know you served on public safety years ago, maybe not now, but what do you think about that idea?
I don't think that being a high school dropout is necessarily mean that you're a bad driver, and that it would serve a purpose to I think probably what is it Mary it thinks is that if you didn't let the kid drop out and then that would be an incentive not to drop out if they had to wait longer to get their driver's license.
Correct. Yep.
I haven't seen any studies that allowed them to do. Sometimes a kid isn't doing real well in their homework and isn't doing real well in achievement in school, and they want to drop out and go be a truck driver or do something automotive because they are inspired by the driving or the ability to drive and the engine kind of thing. And I always as a teacher, I always encouraged that because the kid had to have a chance at succeeding at something. And I also didn't always think that it was such a great thing that B students, to get cheaper insurance, you were rewarding the A and B students when maybe we should be rewarding students' progress, and the kid that was doing just fine as a C student, maybe they should get cheaper insurance too because they were reaching their potential. And so I don't know that grades, ABC kind of things, it should be the measurement for what constitutes cheaper insurance. It should maybe be more the driving record.
All right, we have about 2 minutes left in our half hour this afternoon, Representative Murphy, and we have a question from Don in Duluth. And Don is wondering, how are legislators helping small businesses with the recent, or the tobacco tax, gas tax, and the potential raise in the minimum wage? So he's concerned that there's a lot of money going out of business. How is the legislature helping small businesses? Can you name some legislation that could be helpful to small business?
I think reducing of property taxes, the reduction on property taxes. There were several other things in the tax bill in the House that passed that addressed small business concerns that were in there. But I can't believe that I could convince any person that has a business that sells tobacco and beer and
Sure.
that this wasn't going to hurt.
And the small businesses, continue to struggle in this economy, but the best thing for any small business is that all the economy does well, and that's what
right.
we're seeing is a slow increase in the economy.
And as the economy gets better, then people are out there buying more things and doing more things with their monies. And so we hope that the economy is slowly becoming more and more stable.
All right, Representative Murphy, well, we have run out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming in today and spending a half hour with us, and
You're welcome.
good luck in the coming week. Thanks to Representative Murphy and everyone who has watched tonight and joined us in the studio. Thanks to everybody who called in with a question as well. Please join us again next Sunday for the final Minnesota Legislative Report program of the session. For the crew here at WDSE TV, I'm Greg Grell. Have a good evening.